So 6 Days of Air, a great documentary about South Park. Nice, great look at the inner workings, what's going on with that. Where did this concept come from to decide to look at that and really finally open the doors on what they do there and how it comes so quick?
Yeah, I'm a fan of South Park, and I had worked with Matt and Trey on other projects, and I just knew that as much sort of media as there was out there about South Park, that the real story of how they do that show was not told. Like, they do that show in such an amazing way, 6 days to air, meaning they walk in on Thursday with no idea what the show is going to be about, and Wednesday night the show's done and goes on the air, and they pull an all-nighter every Tuesday night. Which is just crazy. There's no other TV show that gets made like that. And so as a documentary filmmaker, I knew there was a good story there, and I knew because I had known Matt and Trey for a long time, I felt like I could get this kind of unique vantage point, and I've been wanting to do this for a long time. Yeah.
Was it hard to talk them into the concept as a whole?
It was a little bit. At first, I had spoken to Matt about it years ago, and he was kind of like, nah, I think it might be hard to do what we do with cameras around, and they kind of slowly came around to it. We had talked about doing a documentary about the making of Book of Mormon, and that kind of, and I had told them, with the technology now, it could be just me filming. So we didn't have a big film crew, and we didn't have boom mics or lights or anything like that. We just pretty much, it was either just me or that we had one other camera guy, and we were just super small. We stayed out of everyone's way, and I stayed there, so like when they pulled an all-nighter, I pulled an all-nighter too, and so did the camera guy, P.H. O'Brien, and the producer, Jen Ullman. We were all there, kind of felt like we were embedded with the troops there. So it was kind of like, it was a process of earning their trust, as long as I'd known them, and I really wanted to film in the writer's room. That was like really important to me to get in there, but they'd never let cameras in there before, and so we had to kind of figure that one out. We ended up using these little GoPro cameras, and that made it so they were slightly less self-conscious about what they said. And I told them, if you say anything that you don't want on camera in the writer's room, we wouldn't put it on there.
Of course. Now you mentioned being in the trenches. Now, did it? This is a pretty intense situation getting it in. So, were there some scary moments out there on the battlefield?
I was kind of ready for that moment where they're like, get the cameras out of here, or like Trey or Matt start. They're just like, I wish you guys weren't around. And we did actually get asked. Like, there were a couple of days when we showed up, and they were like, Frank, the supervising producer there, was like, you know what, things are a little intense right now. Can you guys kind of give us a break? And we would respect that, but then I would always say, that's when the most interesting stuff happens. So I started pushing them to let us film as much as possible. And we didn't catch anything crazy where, like, chairs get thrown and stuff, and I think that doesn't really happen at South Park at this point. They're all professional.
There's no punching interns or anything like that?
No, nothing like that, but I do think you get a really good sense of the stress that happens there. And I think Matt and Trey are in kind of a good place right now. Like, we thought there was potentially a train wreck coming because they had worked so hard on Book of Mormon, and then they were going right into South Park. So part of me was kind of thinking, like, oh, maybe we'll get, like, maybe they won't be able to, because they've always delivered that show on time. Like, sometimes it's like just barely on time, but it's always been on time, and I didn't want them not to deliver on time, but as a filmmaker, I wanted it to be like really down to the wire. And it didn't, or it would have been cool to capture the one time South Park didn't make it on the air, but they're prepared for any contingency there, like they really are.
Excellent. You'll be working with South Park any future projects?
Yeah, we're actually still filming for a longer feature-length version, because this broadcast is 42 minutes about making one episode, but we had a lot more footage, and I want to keep filming with Matt and Trey. We're actually planning to go film in Colorado with them and make a real sort of definitive documentary about Matt and Trey and all the work that they've done. So yeah, I'll be filming for probably the next 6 months to a year.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Have you been getting any reaction from the documentary since it's aired?
Yeah, a lot of people have. I mean, probably they're just being nice to me, but they said they liked it. Matt and Trey said they liked it, and I think people. I mean, I honestly think people have this. They all say like, I didn't realize how difficult it was for them to make that show. Like, I think that, you know, hopefully people have this newfound respect for South Park now.
You guys are doing yet another South Park game. Given the track history, there have been some complaints about the other game. Is it gonna be good?
You know, and there have been, and that was 10 plus years ago, and we freely admit that we weren't involved in those games. Like that was done by the developer, took hold of that and jumped on it, and actually those first few games, that's why we didn't do games again.
And the big difference now is with South Park Digital Studios is we have a crew on hand to kind of oversee much more closely in the game development process, and working directly with the developer, in this case Other Ocean, to make sure the games look and sounds like South Park. And you know, in this particular game, we've even gone so far as to use some of the animators and storyboard artists that work on the show to create things to use in game. So you know, really trying to make sure that the game has that South Park feel.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. We're one team. Other Ocean and South Park Digital, we work together as one unit. And the things that we've done to develop the game, we've made sure that the pipeline that they do to develop the show and all the other things they do in South Park Digital is the same thing that they get to do for the game as well. So animations and stuff that the animators of the show are used to developing in Maya and all that sort of thing, just drag right on over into the game. They can actually develop that, put it in the game, and see it right away.
Fantastic. Now, I'm looking forward to it because it's one of my favorite stories from South Park. And so, can you give us a little description on how the gameplay is going to go and how far you're taking this story?
Yeah, do you want to talk about gameplay?
Yeah, I can talk about gameplay really quick. It's a 4-player platformer. The key here was to make sure that we could celebrate the show's 15 years. It was kind of the first thing we started talking about. And to do that, we're going to go back to some key points in all those shows during that time. And so what better way to do that than having a 4-player game where you and your friends can play together as the 4 main characters and do a little bit of beating each other up as well as playing co-op throughout the game. 22 levels. Some of the best moments of the show are captured in the game as well.
And I think as far as the story goes, a big deal for us was bringing back one of the most popular storylines from the series. Actually, the original Scott Tenorman Must Die from season 5 was voted as, we did a big vote this year and asked the fans actually to tell us what their favorite episodes of all time were, and Scott Tenorman Must Die is number 2 on the list, and it was like, well, that's a no-brainer at that point. And the other great thing is that we already set up through the canon of the show, we already have that tumultuous relationship between Scott Tenorman and Eric Cartman. So I mean, what better place to start there to do like a platformer style game?
Actually, you're talking about what the fans liked, and I know the whole overarching thing here is the Year of the Fan for South Park, and we can't go a week without thinking, what will the fans want in this game? And we talk about that a lot. And so a lot of the things you're going to see in the game are things that we've actually heard from the fans themselves, and we're doing. In fact, we're like very live too. It's like even we might see something mentioned online, and like it comes up, and we're like, let's put that in now, and everything. So it's pretty amazing watching this stuff come back from the fans and get into the game very quickly.
Fantastic. So it's called South Park Tenorman's Revenge, and it's due out in 2012.
So yeah, spring
2012. So look for the game. It's on Xbox Live, and it should be fantastic.
It will be fantastic.
Nerd Love! Nerd Love! Nerd Love!